Find your way in?
Where'd you park? Where did you park?
Well, I rode my bike. No, I didn't. No. Yeah, it's interesting. I got to take a longer way, so. But hope everybody's doing well. Shoot.
Brian, now that all this stuff is set up and Mark has seen it, did he tell you, after all, you can't trade that first round pick out, you gotta make it because all this stuff's set up?
Not yet, but there's still time to go. So no, but it is pretty amazing just kind of seeing all this kind of come together, and it's just what a cool thing for the Packers and the city of Green Bay and everything. It's just really, really, really neat to see it all come together.
You've had a bunch of extra picks the last few years with the trades. You probably don't. Probably the answer here is probably no. But do you have to approach it any different when you have fewer of those quote unquote premium picks?
No, I don't think so. I think there's probably a little strategy difference, as far as you're going through things, because you just have more ammunition at the top, which is probably makes things a little bit more flexible. But no, I don't think there's anything that changes, how we go about it, building the board or anything like that.
Goody, speaking of ammunition at the top, I think through your 7 drafts, you've never had a draft where you didn't use both your first, second, and third round picks, or a first, second, and third round pick. Just how special would a player have to be for you to be willing to use premium picks to go up to get them, as opposed to, and missing out on those, because you get a lot of good players in the second and third rounds.
Right. Yeah, no, I think it's it's a 2-for-1, right? So he's got to be a pretty good player, and he's got to, I think he's certainly got to fit a vision that we have for him that could come in right away and be productive. But at the same time, I mean, there's those players do become available, and we're certainly not, we wouldn't. It's not like we wouldn't do it, but I do think it's a 2-for-1, and when you're talking about premium picks, those first, second, third, maybe even fourth round type picks, you're expecting those guys to be good players, right? So if you're going to do it, it's got to be a player worth that.
It's kind of the age-old question here of potential versus production. But can you kind of talk about the internal debate among you guys? There's a prospect who is going to be good, was good, but maybe doesn't have the upside of a guy who's got these great traits, but didn't have a whole lot of production, but you can maybe visualize them getting there. Yeah,
well, what you're trying to predict is what they're going to do in the National Football League. That's first and foremost. So, if a player didn't have the kind of production that you think he should in the college level, there's a lot of discussion about why that was, and if you think that that's something that as he moves forward and he progresses as a football player, if that's going to change or not. So that's really it at the end of the day. It's just a matter of looking at his game, and as he moves into the National Football League, will those traits allow him to become a more productive player than maybe he was in college? So I think that's kind of how you look at it.
So how do you project that? Maybe it's probably position specific, but how do you project a guy who didn't do it, but you think could get there?
Yeah, it's just really about where he is in his kind of evolution as a player, right? Where he's on that curve, and particularly now with guys coming out really early. Some guys have been in college 7-8 years now, and you're looking at those different things. It's no different than when you sign a guy to a contract or you draft a guy. You're really trying to do it for what he's going to do over the next 3 or 4 years, not what he's done. So it's about that.
Brian, when you have those discussions, and how often are there vehement disagreements, and if so, how do you guys handle that? I mean, I can't imagine a guy who's followed a prospect from the moment he stepped on whatever campus,
right, gets
in front of the group, and then maybe they don't see it the same way. How do you guys handle that?
Yeah, I mean, there's always, I think you work through it. I mean, I think it's a long process, right? And our scouts have been, part of their process starts certainly much more early than it does for, let's say, us when we really get all together. But as we work through February, January, February, March, into April now, it's constant, right? So a lot of times things really add up, and a lot of us were trained the same way, so we look at things similarly. But when there are a little bit of disagreements, we work through it, and then ultimately, there's got to be decisions made. So once we make a decision, we move on. And I think people would love to think there's these dragouts. That's not really the case.
Never once, really.
And it's just really more about discussions, But at the end of the day, I think it's a very respectful process. Everybody understands that. If you're not willing to, stand up and speak your opinion, then you're not really, that's what you're there for. So you need to be able to do it. but there's a way to do it, and I think, from my past experience, there's a way to do it and there's a way not to do it, and Ted let me know when I didn't do it the right way, so.
Brian, come Saturday at 6, everyone's going to want to grade the draft for each team, A, B, C, D, F. In your experience, when do you think it's fair to grade it? After a year, after 2 years, after 3 years? When do you know whether you really hit the...
Yeah, I don't care. I don't care about that stuff. I mean, to me, it's about our football team and the players that we take. Do they help our football team succeed? You know, in the National Football League, these guys are, you know, moving around so much. It's about the time that you're here with us. Do you impact our football team? You know what I mean? So, and the opportunities they get and where they get drafted and the different things that there's so many variables there. I think that's it's kind of a fool's errand to kind of try to grade those things.
Regarding this year's draft class, even those 5 years removed, the COVID years, some red-shirted, and then NIL. Is there a pocket there that might be there in the 6th and 7th rounds or Saturday night of guys that have played college football for 4 or 5 years?
I hope so. I mean, I think the thing that and I think I spoke on it earlier, one of the last times I talked, but it's a unique class. The numbers, particularly on the bottom of the draft and even in free agency, undrafted college free agency, were just really high. I think there's a ton of guys that came back that would have come out earlier that came back and played because of NIL and the transfer portal and really, you know, I mean, again, we've got a bunch of guys in this draft that played, you know, 6-7 years in college, right? So we got a lot of older guys, 24, 25-year-olds in this class than we've had in the past. We'll probably see that for a little while going the next few years. So that has made it a little bit unique because of the numbers. And, you know, I'm always on a journey to try to, you know, to narrow it down because it makes things clearer for me. But at the same time, the guys deserve to be up there. They deserve to be up there. And so we've spent a lot of time in that department.
Brian, do you need your first-round pick to contribute right away?
No, I mean, I think you'd love to, but I mean, I think a lot of you guys have been around here. You know, it's great when they do, but that's not always the case. I mean, the transition to the National Football League is tough. It's not always easy. A lot of times it's really determined by opportunity. You know what I mean? I mean, if you take a guy in a particular area that he's just going to have a lot more opportunity than somebody else, you know, and we try to stay away from that drafting for need. We try to just, you know, take the best player available if that's possible. But most of the time, a guy's impact in his rookie year comes down to the opportunities that he had more than anything.
Brian, what do you see as the trickle-down effect of guys being able to earn life-changing money in the college ranks through NIL? How does that affect who comes out and doesn't? Anything?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I think we're still kind of wrapping our arms around how it, you know, affects us, you know, moving forward. I think one thing that we've talked a lot about is that I think really, and with some of these guys, it goes all the way back to high school, is that every time they got done with the season, they were looking for what's best for me next, and it was their choice. You know, that's not necessarily going to be the case as they enter the National Football League, and how do they react to that and handle that? In some ways, it's no different than what it's always been. You're looking for guys that can handle the transition into the National Football League with their maturity and learning how to be a pro. You're looking for guys that can do that at a quicker pace than others. And whether what these guys are going through in college now, you know, helps that transition or hurts it, I think we're still kind of trying to figure that out.
Brian, have you made a decision on the fifth-year option for those two guys yet?
I think we're pretty close. We won't deal with that until after the draft, but I think for both those guys, whatever mechanism we use, we'd like to keep those guys around for 26 and beyond. So whether that's through doing the fifth-year option on these guys or extending them one way or the other, we're planning to do that. We'd like to do that. So.
Goody, how do you feel about just in general how the process went for the whole group this year? And I mean, if this thing were starting at 7 o'clock tonight, are you guys ready to go?
Yeah, we're ready. I mean, we always joke that on really last Friday we should all take a 5-day vacation and come back, right? Like, 'cause there's more mistakes made in these next few days than anything else. But the process went great. You know, our scouts we have a great group. They work really well together. The way they not only attack their fall, but then, you know, there's such collaboration between our guys through the All-Star games, the Combine, the Pro Days, and everything we ask these guys to do that is so important for how we get to the answers. And kind of touching on some of the climate of college football right now. I mean, so many of these guys have transferred. So when our guys go into a school and they're talking to a position coach, it used to be when I was doing it for the most part, that guy recruited him in his home, knew mom and dad, watched him go through his maturation process in school, at one school. That rarely happens anymore. So like those guys' ability to work together, I mean, our scout may be at Southern Cal getting background information for a player that's in Miami now. You know what I mean? So who's not even on campus. So they've adapted incredibly well to that, and I feel really strongly in what they've done to kind of get us to where we are right now.
Brian, there was the report that you were the only GM to go watch McMillan's workout in Arizona. What have
I was there.
Oh, you weren't? Okay. I'm being serious.
No, I'm just kidding. No, yeah, I was there. I don't know if I was.
Impressions of him throughout your
Yeah.
multiple meetings with him.
And I don't know if I was the only one there. I may be the only one reported to be there, but no, good. You know, we had him up for our 30 visit as well, and we've kind of he's a third-year junior coming out, so we've spent a lot of time with him. So it's been good.
You've ended up with a pretty high percentage of 30 visit guys being on your team. So when I mean, obviously you can't draft all 30, but when you use those, especially when you have 3 big name wide receivers be part of that process, you know, you get the Javon Walker question every year, but do you think you're looking at the position any differently this year because of the visits you had and maybe where your roster is at that position?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I feel really good about our roster right now. I mean, I think that's one of the. It doesn't happen every year. I mean, every year is a little bit different, but like, if we had to go play next week, I feel really good about our roster and our ability to win and go compete. So, really across the board. So, hopefully as this draft unfolds, we're able to just kind of sit back and select the best players that fall to us. I mean, that'll be, I think something we prepared ourselves to be in. So, no, I don't think we've looked at it really any differently than other than certainly if there's an opportunity to take a player at that position that makes sense, we'll do it. But I don't think we feel like we need to do anything.
In your 7 drafts, I think 4 out of the 7 you've had double-digit number of picks by the end of the day, and I think 2 others it's 9. So sitting at 8 now, do you go in with your goal to trade back a couple times and get to 10, or how does that mechanism work?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly we'd love to. Whether that's where we do that and how we do that will really be dependent on the opportunities that are there and the players that are there. Right, we're not going to pass up a really good player to move back unless we somehow feel we could still get that player. So we'll see. I mean, yeah, I mean, I'd like to have 15 every year. I think that would be just about right. But I think there'll be opportunities, but at the same time, it's such an unpredictable thing. We'll see.
Right, does the draft process get easier the longer you're in it?
No, it's enjoyable. I mean, this is part of what I think a lot of us really enjoy this part of it. But I wouldn't say it gets any easier. There's a certain amount of work that needs to be done. There's really no shortcuts to it. You kind of have to go, through our phases and make sure you don't miss anything along the way. And there are times whether it's with an individual player or a group of players that you kind of maybe early in the process you feel, I feel really good about this, knowing these players, but you can't skip the rest of it because I think doing it as long as I have, things can change. More information can change the way you see things, and it's really important that you don't miss any of those steps.
How well do you sleep the night before the draft?
Good. Yeah. No. I think that it's kind of like, it's like anything. It's, and I know this very well because there's many tests in high school that I went into that test not prepared, and how that feels. And a few of them I was prepared, and it's just like that. I mean, when you feel really prepared, I think you feel really good about it. And you don't worry too much about it. Again, it's unpredictable. I think we really haven't ever been up. I think AJ Hawk we take him 5th, I think, or something like that. I think when you're in that top 10, you have a little bit of an idea of how things are falling. You're working really hard to make sure you know how those things are going to fall because it is going to matter. I think when you're picking in the 20s or higher like we have most of the time, it's just very unpredictable. So you just have to be, you have to be prepared across the board.
So are you proof that you cannot be prepared for high school tests and still be a success in life?
Yeah, we'll stop there.
We asked you questions last year about the RAS score and how that fits in. Obviously, Stewart has a 9.99. I think Rashawn was a 9.95. In what ways do you use that as a puzzle piece? And how much of that do you have to be a little bit careful with, especially if production doesn't match RAS score?
Yeah, so we don't use RAS score at all. We don't have anything like that. We do have some analytic scores that our analytic people do on their own, that measures, athletic traits and other things. But yeah, we've never really used an RAS. I know what that is. We've never really used that, in any, whether it's free agency, the draft, or anything like that. So, now I've come from the Ron Wolf, Ted Thompson, so like traits are very, very important to us. Testing numbers are important. And that's part of the changing world in scouting right now is, these guys are really picking and choosing what they do. We don't have universal numbers across the board like we used to, which makes it tough. But there are some new technologies coming into play with GPS data and things like that, you kind of have to try to make up for it. So the traits are really important to us, but at the same time, on like a cumulative RAS score, we've never really used that at all.
There's so much testing for these prospects from the combine, the physical stuff, the medical stuff, Wonderlic tests, this, that. Is there any sort of questions that you lean on to try to gauge a player's competitiveness, how much he just wants to be a football player out there? Is there something that you lean on year after year you feel has helped you gauge that in a guy?
Yeah, that's a great question, and yeah, we do. It's their past history, and what our scouts are able to determine while they're in the schools, and what the people that are around them say about them, how they handle adversity, how they handle teammates, all the things that go into that. That's really, now we do some psychological testing when the guys actually take the tests. That gives us some insight into some of those things, but really it's the boots on the ground and the guys that have, really invested in the people around that player and how he's handled himself in the 3 or 4 or 6 or 7 years he's been in college.
Ryan, how much more challenging is it with a lot of the players this year not doing some of the testing, whether it be via injury or just choosing not to do a specific test? Does that change your eval or just make it more difficult for you?
Makes it more difficult, I think, and but it does change it. I mean, we've always kind of, know what you know and know what you don't know. Well, there's some things we don't know this year that makes it you more uncomfortable as you're going down the path to selecting these guys. So it's unfortunate. I don't think it really helps the player. I think it hurts them when they don't do these things. But at the same time, that's just that we have to. It's our job to figure out another way, and so we've spent a lot of time on that as well.
Along those lines, Brian, and you mentioned GPS data a second ago. Is there does every college have GPS data? Like you can look at a corner receiver and know, or again, are you trying to?
Yeah, I wouldn't say every college. I would say certainly the major colleges, Power 5 and all that stuff, but we don't have it on every player. But we do have a lot of data, and our guys, do a great job under Mike Hallbach and Football Technology of kind of putting that into, into kind of a format that makes sense for us as we move forward. So if we don't have certain testing numbers, maybe we have something that can make up for that.
In the first round, when you're picking in the 20s year after year, how much in years past have 3 or 4 trade-ups have shocked you that that changes your board when you get to your pick? And how much time can you spend on scenarios and if that might happen?
Yeah, so you're saying if somebody trades ahead of us and takes a player maybe we weren't expecting, happens all the time. And so, we spend the majority of our process is really trying to get, the board right vertically by position. And then, at the end here, we do spend a ton of time obviously horizontally and trying to get that right as well. So, once you kind of get to that spot, you kind of work through those scenarios a little bit, what you might be faced with, but yeah, so to me, you've gone through it so many times that, even when it happens, it doesn't tend to, take you off out of your thought process because you've probably already gone through it.
So, Ryan, in the past, you've shown that if you go out and maybe address a need in free agency, you're not afraid to go and draft somebody in basically that same grade for that same position. How important is it to kind of balance those contracts that are a little bit higher, your higher paid guys, with rookie deals that are a little bit more team friendly, especially at the beginning of their contracts?
What exactly do you mean to that? So
in the past, like a few years ago, when you went out and drafted, you went out and signed Za'Darius and Preston, you drafted Rashawn,
Yeah.
you signed Amos, you draft Darnell. Last year, you signed McKinney, you draft 3 safeties.
Right.
How do you balance that where you're addressing a need for now with somebody that's going to be high paid, but
Right.
also adding competition in that room with guys that aren't?
Yeah, good question. I think it's, to me, you always want to, in each room, you'd like to have a mix, of that, if you can. It's not always possible. But I think you'd like to be developing players along with guys who are ready to play as well at the same time. So, but, you know, to me, like, the one nice thing about here is it doesn't matter your draft status or your contract status, the best players are going to play, you know. I think having that comfort level that, you know, we've always had the support. Mark obviously has been so supportive with how Matt and I have done things over the last 6-7 years. And that's the one thing, like, you know, it doesn't matter if we take you really high and an undrafted free agent comes in and is playing better, like that guy's going to play, right? So I think it's a good way to build a football team, and it's a luxury that we have here.
You also have a bunch of guys who are getting ready for second contract extensions like Zach, Christian, Romeo. Do you have to be conscious of maybe where those discussions are and maybe prepare to address needs, or do you just kind of, it will work itself out?
Yeah, no, I think you're very aware of those things, and not necessarily where the discussions are, because sometimes we haven't started any of those discussions yet, but you have to be aware of where your football team is. And I do think when I, maybe earlier on in my career, you know, where you might be looking 3, 4, 5 years out, now you're really looking 2 to 3, you know, with the way the cap is moving, and just the nature of the National Football League. I mean, you know, that's just kind of the way it is. So I think you're aware of that. Whenever you go into, whether it's free agency, the draft, it's never looking at 1 year. It's never looking at just that season coming up. It's usually looking at least the next 2.
Brian, you mentioned earlier about feeling good about your roster and being able to go out right now, play and win. Does that, coupled with the fact that you're going to add 8 guys and probably more knowing you, trying to trade down and get a bunch of dudes in the mix to compete, does that hurt you when it comes to undrafted free agency? I know you're coming off a year where you had a pretty small class.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think because historically here, 2 things. What I just talked about, that if you come here and you compete and you know you earn the right to make the football team, you know, there's nothing holding you back from us doing that, right? So that's one. And then we just historically have had pretty good success developing those kind of players. A lot of those guys, as you know, have become really, really good players here and had great careers. And I think the agency community understands that. And I think as those guys, the guys that are really in tune with that, as they look at the options to place players, understand that. So I think we've, you know, I don't feel at any kind of disadvantage in undrafted, you know, free agency. I think, you know, we feel really good about our process there.
There's so much data out there, but evaluating on-field instincts and your guys, when you're having your meetings, is that, lack of a better term, the tougher conversations because maybe you can't quantify it compared to someone who's a super high-end athlete?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, that's what's one of the harder things. I think also one of the harder things is where he is in his development with that, because instincts aren't something you either have or don't have. I think it's something that is, you know, over time you either, you know, gain or don't. But every player has had a little bit different part of their process. A lot of that depends on how much playing time they got in college and maybe where they came from even in high school. You know, there's some guys that didn't start playing football till their, you know, junior, senior year of high school, while other guys have been playing since they've been 5. So, but judging that instinctual quality with all the different schemes and the different places that these guys are playing, and the movement of these guys now, you know, where they're not in the same system for 3 or 4 years like they used to be, where they can develop those instincts within a scheme. Now they're bouncing around, and it makes it much tougher. I do think the player development side in the National Football League is going to have to get better because of, you know, kind of the way things are transpiring in college.
Going back to Mike's question about curveballs, you know, Ron tells that story of thinking he's getting Ray Lewis, and then he goes while he's on the phone. You can do everything you can to prepare for every eventuality. And you've been in that room, this will be 8 as the big chair. But have there been moments where things have happened where you're like, holy crap, that was, or have you really been able to kind of avoid those in the last 7
I think the only time where it gets a little is when maybe you have more than one option, like there's the player you would pick, or maybe there's a trade to move back, you know, and you're kind of dealing with those. You're on the clock, and maybe the team you're dealing with isn't, you know, you're not finalized, and you may want to move back. Those things can get a little tight at times. You know, at the end of the day, you better be prepared to pick a player. You know, I've never ever felt like when it was time to pick that I didn't have a player to pick or wasn't, you know. But I do think there was times, okay, maybe we have a few players to pick, and we were looking to move back and trying to get a deal there. And you know, you're on the clock, and there's time, and you know. But as far as like, you know, it's no different at every point in every round. as we get close, let's say 5, 6, 7 picks away, you know, I'm in my notes there. It's just kind of like I kind of got the players and I got enough, right? So if you know, if we're 7 picks away, I got 7 players, and if all 6 go before, then I got one. So yeah, I think, but I do think that there's times when there's maybe options to move out of that pick or pick the player that can kind of get a little bit. I wouldn't say just tense. You're just trying to find out if it's going to work or not.
And then going back to Dave's question earlier, so I can't tell you how many times I've heard you say, well, this guy loves football. And we would assume, well, they all love football, right? They're going in the NFL, but that's not always the case, and we've seen that with some guys. So
Yeah.
is it, where does that fit into the puzzle of talent and production and everything else? But also with guys moving from school to school, like you were talking about earlier, is that getting harder and harder to get a good feel on because you do value it?
Yeah, I think the motivation of why guys play is something we spend a lot of time trying to find out their whys. I do think it's important. This league's hard. You know, there's a lot of adversity for even the best players, and to go out there and compete each and every day to get better, it takes a lot. I mean, this is a lot of competition in these rooms. So the motivation for these guys to go to do that better be strong. If it's not, it's probably easy to find a way out. And I think one of the other questions was like, we're getting a lot more players that probably have some more options now too because of what the money they might have made in college. There's not a ton of those guys that made life-changing money in college, but there's a few. And when it gets hard, how do they respond to that? I mean, we spend a lot of time throughout this process trying to figure that out. The other thing, as you guys know, is priorities change, whether that's within the first 3 or 4 years they're in the National Football League or when they get into second and third contracts, priorities change, and the will to compete every day and go out there can change on guys too. So it's not only something that, as we evaluate college players coming into the league, we're constantly evaluating our own players and players across the league.
Right, now the draft weeks arrive. You joked earlier in the offseason about, the logistics may be this or that. Are there any logistical challenges for you? And on a secondary note, throughout the building, do you sense an amount of pride for putting on this event here, despite what it makes for more work for some people?
Yeah, first of all, not a ton yet, the logistics part of it. I'm a little concerned about our scouting staff because they got to walk right through the corridor of all the bars to the hotel, and that's a very temptation there. So, but in all seriousness, it's been really cool to see the kind of the organization, the city, everybody rally around. I mean, this is something I don't think a lot of people thought could ever happen. And whatever complications there are, trouble getting in and out of here, well worth it. And I'm just really excited to see, how this thing comes together. And I just think you got to give Mark a lot of credit. I mean, this was obviously his vision, and for him to be able to pull this off has been really cool to see. So
2 more,
2
please.
years ago, you had this big draft class, 13 guys, and a lot of them still here, contributed early. And starting like with Van Ness, they're in their 3rd year. How high is the expectation from that?
Yeah, we have high expectations for those. We always kind of have. Obviously, we took him very early, and I'm excited for him. He's still a really young player, and as you guys know, when he was in college, he didn't play a ton in college. So, but we're very excited where he is on his developmental path, and expect big things from him this year. So, certainly, if we're going to get to where we want to go to, he's going to be a big part of that. And so, he's here, and I know. He's here. I think he's here early. I know he was here for a while, and then he did the tailgate tour and stuff. And so I know it's really important to him, and he's been busting his tail to be right this year.
Would you still like to have a resolution on Jair before Thursday? And if you don't trade him before or during the draft, are you just going to keep him on the team for next season?
Yeah, we'll work through that. I don't really have any updates on Jair. He's obviously on our roster right now. We'll see how the draft goes, and then see where we are at that point.
I know you're very supportive of John Eric taking another job. That did not happen. You get still his benefit of his experience here. Not going. Yeah. But just how nice is that for the draft to still have him around?
Yeah, I mean, John Eric's a huge part of our process. Certainly someone that I've worked with for a very long time and lean on for a lot of things. He's absolutely 100% ready to run his own show, and I think that time's coming. We'll enjoy every minute we have with him. If he's here for as long as I'm here, that's great. No, it's kind of like, I want to see all these guys on our staff get these kind of opportunities. I think we have a lot of guys that are ready right now and a lot of guys that are going to be ready in time. And that's something, as a guy who's been here and watched John Schneider, Reggie McKenzie, John Dorsey, Scott McLuhan get their opportunities. But as I watched that, there was a time there I was like, "Are these guys ever going to leave?" You know what I mean? Like, because like you wanted to have an opportunity too. So I think it's really healthy for our staff, for these guys to be in the mix for these opportunities. And I suspect not only John Eric, but a bunch of guys will be as we move forward here.
Given how tight you are with all those guys, I'm curious, when you get to Saturday night, I don't know if you're still going back to the beer fridge and everybody's coming over, but how will you view this as a successful 3 days? What do you need to accomplish, you and your crew, to feel that way by Saturday?
Yeah. Again, the unpredictability of the draft is real, but I think for us, it's just a matter of, we take a lot of pride in the people that we bring into this locker room. We're obviously chasing things that are really big around here, and we got a very good football team with some really good guys in that locker room. And the guys that we bring into this locker room, to me, need to be the kind of guys that are going to fit into that culture and add to it. And so, this every year, this is an opportunity to do that. The culture of your football team, comes from your players. And so that's a big part of what we're doing.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys. Good luck.